For years, Florida sold one of the most powerful dreams in America. Sunshine, beaches, palm trees, no state income tax. A place where life looked easier, warmer, and somehow lighter than everywhere else. And to be fair, Florida is still a giant magnet. The state added about 196,680 residents between July 2024 and July 2025, bringing its population to roughly 23.46 million. But here is the detail that changes the whole story. Florida's net domestic migration dropped to just 22,517 in 2025, down sharply from 58,411 in 2024, 183,646 in 2023, and 310,892 in 2022. In other words, people are still coming, but the old effortless rush into Florida has cooled dramatically. And that is exactly why this video matters. Because Florida is not failing. It is not suddenly a bad place to live. The problem is more subtle and in some ways more interesting. Florida is no longer the automatic bargain people still imagine. It still delivers weather and lifestyle. But once you actually price out the full cost of living, the state starts to look less like the obvious answer and more like a premium product. Merrick's 2025 Annual Cost of Living Index put Florida at 101.4, slightly above the national benchmark of 100. By comparison, Texas came in at 91.1, Georgia at 92.2, South Carolina at 92.7, Tennessee at 90.1, and North Carolina at 97.9. Florida still has no state income tax, but that no longer guarantees that living there feels cheap. Housing is where the story becomes even harder to ignore. Zillow's February 2026 data shows the average home value in Florida at $372,755. That is above the US average of $360,591. It is also well above Texas at $297,592, South Carolina at $300,562, Georgia at $328,277, Tennessee at $327,696, and North Carolina at $331,413. So when people say Florida still feels expensive even though prices have cooled from the frenzy years, that is not just emotion.
The statewide numbers still put Florida above several of the warm state alternatives that compete with it most directly. And then there is insurance, which is where a lot of Florida math breaks down. According to reporting based on Florida Office of Insurance Regulation data, the average annual homeowner's insurance premium in Florida, including wind coverage, is now about $3,815. Officials have emphasized that the pace of increases has slowed and that more insurers have filed for 0% hikes or even reductions, which suggests the market is stabilizing. But stabilizing at a high level is not the same thing as becoming cheap. For a household already stretching to afford a home, a high insurance baseline changes the entire monthly picture. That is why I think the old Florida myth needs updating. The myth said Florida was where you move to lower your tax bill, enjoy warm weather, and live more easily. The reality in 2026 is different. Florida is still one of the most attractive states in America if you care about climate, coast, and brand name lifestyle. But it increasingly asks you to pay for that image. And once a place starts charging premium prices, it should be compared not as the obvious default, but as one choice among several. That is the real shift. Florida has not become undesirable, it has become debatable. It is also important to say that Florida is not one housing market. It is many different Floridas under one name. Zillow shows Miami at about $573,963, which is a completely different world from Jacksonville at about $282,367. Tampa sits around $369,079, much closer to the state average. So when someone says Florida is too expensive, the first skeptical question should be, which Florida? Coastal glamour markets and more practical inland or northern markets do not behave the same way. But that actually strengthens the larger point, not weakens it.
Even if you can still find more reasonable pockets, the broad statewide image of Florida as a simple, low-cost, warm-weather move is harder to defend than it used to be. And before we go further, I want to be careful with the framing. I do not think the smart way to do this is to declare 5 states better than Florida as if everyone wants the same life. That is too simplistic. The better question is this: If Florida no longer feels like the easy bargain, which warm states now offer a stronger value proposition for different kinds of people? That means we are not looking for one winner. We are looking for states that may give you more for your money, depending on what you actually care about: cost, taxes, housing, pace of life, access to coast, access to cities, everyday pressure. That is a much more honest way to think about relocation. The first real challenger is South Carolina, and if you only look at momentum, South Carolina may be the most important alternative to Florida right now. The Census Bureau says South Carolina was the fastest growing state in the country from July 2024 to July 2025, growing 1.5%, with a net domestic migration gain of 66,622. That is not a niche trend, that is a serious movement of people. Merrick puts South Carolina's overall cost of living at 92.7, far below Florida's 101.4. Zillow puts the average home value there at $300,562, again far below Florida's statewide level. On paper, that is the kind of gap people feel in real life. But South Carolina comes with its own warning label, and this is where people make mistakes. They hear South Carolina is cheaper than Florida and imagine the whole state is a hidden bargain. It is not. Charleston's average home value is about $581,145, which is actually higher than Miami's average and far above Florida's statewide average. Columbia, by contrast, sits around $226,769. So South Carolina can absolutely be a better value than Florida, but only if you are selective.
If you chase the most polished coastal market, you can recreate the same affordability problem in a different zip code. If you choose carefully, though, South Carolina may be one of the best warm weather compromises in the country. The reason South Carolina matters so much is that it offers a version of the Southeast without as much of Florida's premium pricing. You still get warmth. You still get coastal access if you want it. You still get a migration story that suggests people see real value there. And the state's housing component in the Merrick Index is 80.6, compared with Florida's 103.5. That is a huge gap. So when people wonder why South Carolina has become such a serious player, the answer is not mysterious. It is not just charm. It is arithmetic. The second challenger is Texas, and Texas offers a totally different pitch. Florida sells coast and lifestyle. Texas sells scale, opportunity, and price. Merrick puts Texas at 91.1 on cost of living, and Zillow shows an average home value of $297,592. Texas also has no state individual income tax, which keeps it in the same broad tax conversation as Florida. The state grew 1.2% from 2024 to 2025 and added more people numerically than any other state, reaching about 31.71 million residents. So if Florida feels too expensive or too lifestyle-priced, Texas becomes the obvious alternative for people who still want a warm Sunbelt state, but with a larger menu of cities and, at least on entry, cheaper housing. But Texas is where people can fool themselves if they stop at the headline. Yes, the home values are lower than Florida's statewide number. Yes, there is no state income tax. But Texas is not a frictionless bargain. Independent state-by-state property tax comparisons continue to place Texas far above states like South Carolina and Tennessee. In other words, Texas may be cheaper to enter, but not always cheaper to own over time.
So Texas works best for people who want a big state alternative to Florida and know how to price the full ownership cost, not just the sticker price of the house. The third challenger is North Carolina, and North Carolina is the state that probably makes the most sense for the most people. It does not have Florida's branding power. It does not have Texas scale. It does not look as cheap as South Carolina on paper, but it is balanced in a way that many people increasingly prefer. The Census Bureau says North Carolina grew 1.3% from 2024 to 2025, one of the fastest rates in the country. Merrick puts its cost of living at 97.9, still below Florida. Zillow puts the average home value at $331,413, again below Florida. And for 2026, North Carolina's flat state income tax rate is 3.99%, which means it is not a no-income tax state, but it is also not punishing compared with many coastal states. What North Carolina really sells is less drama, less of the extreme weather identity Florida has, less of the giant state sprawl Texas has, less of the all-or-nothing coastal premium. But again, people should not romanticize the whole state. Raleigh's average home value is about $428,831, and Charlotte's is about $393,846. Those are not cheap numbers. So North Carolina works best when you see it clearly, not as a bargain basement, but as a more measured, more flexible alternative to Florida. It is a state where you may give up some tropical fantasy, but gain a stronger everyday balance between cost and livability. The fourth challenger is Georgia, and Georgia deserves more attention than it usually gets in these conversations. Merrick's 2025 index puts Georgia at 92.2, which is dramatically below Florida's 101.4. Zillow puts the statewide average home value at $328,277, again comfortably below Florida.
Georgia does have a state income tax, unlike Florida, Texas, and Tennessee, but the broader cost structure still makes it a serious alternative for people who want warm weather, major metro access, and a more flexible housing map than Florida often offers. And Georgia, like Florida and the Carolinas, is really a story about choosing the right market. Atlanta sits around 381,549, which means the flagship metro is not exactly cheap, but Augusta is about 173,222. That gap matters. It means Georgia can be expensive if you choose the obvious place, or very workable if you choose the practical place. Florida has this same split, but the difference is that Georgia's statewide baseline starts lower. So for people who want a warm southern state without paying Florida-style lifestyle premiums, Georgia can quietly make a lot more sense than its image suggests. The fifth challenger is Tennessee, and Tennessee might be the most psychologically attractive alternative of all. It has no state individual income tax. Merrick puts it at 90.1 on cost of living, and Zillow puts the average home value at $327,696. That gives Tennessee a cleaner value state profile than Florida. It feels warm enough for many movers, culturally familiar to people leaving other parts of the South or Midwest, and less tied to coastal insurance anxiety. On paper, Tennessee looks like the kind of place that still lets people breathe. But Tennessee also has a trap, and it is the same trap we have seen in several of these alternatives. The famous markets are not the same as the state average. Nashville's average home value is about $429,861, which is above the statewide numbers for Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee itself. So Tennessee is not cheap everywhere. It is cheap enough in enough places to remain compelling. That distinction matters.
A lot of relocation mistakes happen because people compare one state average to another, then move into the hottest metro and wonder why the math stopped working. Tennessee is a good reminder that affordability is always local. Now step back and look at what all 5 challengers have in common. None of them is simply better than Florida. What they offer is a stronger ratio between cost and comfort for certain people. South Carolina offers perhaps the clearest value case if you choose carefully. Texas offers scale and lower entry prices, but with important ownership caveats. North Carolina offers balance. Georgia offers flexibility and a lower baseline than Florida. Tennessee offers a clean value story, so long as you do not buy into its most expensive markets. And all of them, in different ways, force the same conclusion. Florida is now competing on lifestyle, not on cheapness. That does not mean Florida has lost. It means Florida has changed categories. If you want warm weather at almost any cost, a massive retiree infrastructure, famous beach markets, and the full cultural identity of the Sunshine State, Florida may still be exactly what you want. The state also still has powerful migration inflows overall, helped in part by strong net international migration. So this is not a collapse story, it is a value story. Florida can still be worth it, but worth it is very different from obviously affordable. And that is probably the fairest way to end this. Florida is not cheap anymore, at least not in the broad, easy way people still talk about it. It is still desirable, it is still powerful as a brand, it is still one of the great warm weather states in America. But the burden of proof has shifted. Years ago, you had to explain why you were not moving to Florida. Now, in 2026, you increasingly have to explain why Florida is still the best value for you once you compare it to South Carolina, Texas, North Carolina, Georgia, or Tennessee. That is a very different conversation, and it is why the migration map of America is becoming much more interesting than the old cliches suggest.